Before this video starts, I just wanted to say that my mic volume is not going to be super consistent. I don't have it standing right now. If you can't tell, I'm just holding my mic. So I'm sorry if the audio is a little hard to listen to. Please bear with me. I appreciate the understanding. So again, sorry about the mic. Thanks for understanding. And I hope you enjoy the video. Hello. It's been a while. If it's your first time here, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome. It's been a busy couple months. I had a whole setup and I was ready to go and ready to start recording YouTube videos. And I left the country. Yeah, so I've been in Canada for the past 2.5 months or so, visiting my partner. And I brought all of my recording equipment, which is why you're seeing this in a different setup. This is their guest room. So yeah, we're going to try our best. I've been reading a lot about design and design trends and how they started, and I've thought it was very interesting. So I figured, why don't we talk about that? Because design is cool, and the history behind design is even cooler. Also, I wanted to shout out my patrons that help support the channel. If you want to become a patron, you can do so. The link will be in the description below. You can get things like monthly stickers, access to my Illustrator files, and also just general design tips. And it's a better way to connect. Because I enjoy being divisive, we're going to rank these design trends. Most of these trends are popular for 2022. Some of them have been popular for a while, but that's besides the point. I wanted to talk about them. I wanted to get into them, and I wanted to share all the stuff that I've been reading and researching and hearing about and seeing, and I think it's very cool. So today we have 7 designs that we're talking about today, all varying styles, varying backgrounds, varying histories. I'm going to give you the whole rundown of what I've learned, how it started, where it took influence from, yada, yada, yada. I just wanted to mention I am going to be crediting all these artists. These artists worked very hard on this art, and just because my opinion may sway and say I don't like a specific art style does not mean that these artists did a bad job. I think all these artists are incredibly talented for their own field. This is literally just my opinion. So please take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, except for the history behind it, because all this stuff is important. So let's just hop into it. First off, anti-design. Anti-design hits way closer to home than I thought, actually. Researching the history behind anti-design is really what made me realize it's something that I used very, very early in life. I say early in my design career. Anti-design is based around surrealism, but more specifically, brutalism. If you're not familiar with what brutalism was this type of style that was introduced in architecture in the 1950s, where these building styles had this like heavy looming feeling with like, they use the word ruthless a lot. I don't know if that's the word that I would use, but it sticks out. So it's one of those things that you would maybe see as like ugly or like missing some specific like styles or something along those lines, essentially to where you look at this thing, you're like, this feels wrong. And that transitioned into the anti-design of graphic design, which I think is very cool. So looking at this graphic, this is a graphic done by Elliot is a cool guy. This is a great example of anti-design. If you look at the actual poster itself, it has a lot of elements that don't really flow, if that makes sense. Like they're not symmetrical, and there's these beautiful typefaces that are big and bright, but he's using different elements, you know, just making it playful and making it fun. And the reason I resonate with this so much is a lot of my art back in the day was based around covering really hard to talk about topics, but making them playful, because I love like the classroom style. So I definitely relate with this kind of anti-design style. I also love the weird asymmetrical wording down at the bottom that you can barely read, but it's there. It's very funny to me, and it's also very relatable. So I might be coming across a little bit biased with this one, but I am going to rank this in an A tier. I go A, not S, just because I don't know if it's perfect. I've leaned away from this design style for a reason. I like to be a bit more deliberate with the stuff that I'm designing now. Not to say that there isn't room in the design world for something like this, but that's just my opinion. Like I said, it might not be the right one, but it's my opinion. The next style is the one that I dived in the deepest, and I think this is the coolest. This is called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, and I'm so sorry, Yukio. I'll put it up on the screen.
Yukio.
This is such an interesting graphic design style to me. This is a design done by an artist called Gigi, and it is so cool. It looks so modern, but also so ancient Japanese style, like woodblock printing, which is a good transition because
Yukio
is a printing method used from woodblock carvings. And it was a huge trend in the 17th and the 18th century, 1600s. This started in the 1600s and we still see it today. I think that is so cool. It's typically characterized with flat illustrations and styles, which is very obvious. And you'd see that in traditional Japanese woodblock printing. I think the most recognizable hand-carved woodblock prints that you would probably recognize is Under the Wave off Kanagawa. It's the Japanese wave that I think a lot of people are familiar with. They've probably seen it in art books or they've seen it referenced. It's a beautiful piece. It's an awesome way to reinvent this style. And the coolest part about this to me is this style derived from vector graphics. And to think of how far back this stuff went, vector graphics were invented in 1960 by Ivan Sutherland. Initially, they were not used for art, but they've developed into being used for art. And lo and behold, we had the Yukio graphic design style. And I think that's so cool. That's something that started in the 1600s, that was refined in the 1700s, and then had a kind of revival in digital art in the 1990s and, was enabled in the 1960s by one guy, turned into this cool graphic design mix mash. So I'm going to put this in S tier because of the history behind it and just how cool it is. The next one we're going to be talking about is one that I've heard a lot about, but I didn't know much about, which is Corporate Memphis. This is an art piece done by Sriya Chapara, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing their name wrong. Corporate Memphis is a very divisive art style, I would say. It's one of those corporate, flat, very, for some people would say lifeless. I disagree, but it has been characterized that way before. Style of art that feels very weird. I think it's so divisive because we associate it with so many different forms of corporate art. We associate it with corporations and capitalism, and it can give off this looming weird vibe. This is an art style that has been dubbed flat art. And what's funny about this that I didn't know until I researched this is Corporate Memphis is attributed to starting from a commission Facebook design by a company called Buck Studios in 2017, which I think is hilarious. It makes sense why people hate it because all the stuff that Facebook is going through right now and how it is very controversial and not a ton of people are a fan of that companies, understandably so. So I think there may be some subconscious to this a little bit. These designs are typically characterized with flat human characteristics, disproportionate features, bendy limbs, small torsos, minimal facial expressions. So they're very flat and they're very simple and colorful, and they're meant to be inviting. What I found interesting about this as well too is in my research, this art is characterized specifically to show humans interacting with technology or promoting something. That's what characterizes Corporate Memphis as Corporate Memphis, is it has to be essentially selling something or conveying something, which makes me feel a little weird, but I get it. It's weird. So I have an opinion of this. I like the art style, but I'm not a huge fan in its application. So no offense, but I'm going to put this in the D tier. Please don't get mad at me. I'm sorry. It's not for me. I get it. And maybe for some people, it's not for me. Moving on to another incredibly controversial topic. This is AI art. Here's the thing about AI art. Okay. I do not like AI art. I know it is controversial again. It's very divisive. We have things from the bad of AI art where people think it's going to steal your jobs. And we also have the fun where we make all of these crazy memes with DALL-E. I don't like how AI art looks. I'm not a huge fan of it I'm using this to make art and post it and claim it as my own perspective. Now, I will say I've seen this art used for reference for traditional artists. And in that sense, I totally understand. Having accessibility to be able to say, I want to see the moonlight shining on a Wednesday night at 12 o'clock p.m. and I'm on a hill and I'm using that as reference, go for it. I think it's great. But it is important to acknowledge the fact that there are some negatives to AI art, like NFTs. I know that some people sway one way or another with NFTs. I've even dipped my feet into the NFT space. I am not a fan of it. I did more research. I don't like what it stands for. And honestly, the crypto market is crashing. So not something to get into for me. But the conception of AI art started with different forms of AI generators like Runaway ML, DALL-E, Gone Breeder, or Magenta. There's a lot more that I'm probably missing. I couldn't find any specific time that AI art started, but we can safely assume it was in the 2010s or the 2020s because that's when we started seeing this stuff really pop off. Crypto has been around since I think the 2000s, so we can assume that this has been being used for a long time. But because of my personal opinion on AI art and how I don't like it as an application, it is going in the D tier as well. I understand the uses. I don't feel as bad about this one. I think more people will relate with me on this opinion than the corporate Memphis perspective, but we will see. And also, please leave a comment if you have any opinions on any of these designs. Or if these art styles resonate with you in a different way, share it, talk about it. This is what this is all about. Art is about expression and opinion and how it makes you feel. So we should talk about that, which is why I'm talking about it today. The next art piece is one that's playful, fun. It is voxel art. I learned about voxel art very recently. I knew of voxel art. I didn't know it was called voxel art. I think voxel art is really cool because it's a style that's used in some video games. There's one very popular video game that I can't remember. Oh. So the game I was thinking of was Crossy Road, which is hilarious because that came out when I was in high school. But that's a great example, Crossy Road, of voxel art. Voxel art is so interesting to me because it is art made from cubes, but more specifically voxels. If you're wondering what voxels are, it derives from the word volumetric pixel. And if you don't know what that means, don't worry, I didn't either. I had to look it up. A volumetric pixel is a cube on a three-dimensional space. I think I read that correctly. I hope I read that correctly. And essentially what people do is they choose an angle and they design art on that angle in that 3D space with these voxels. I know this sounds wild. Bear with me. How this is represented in art is like what we have on the screen here by this artist, Omid Jafari. This is a interpretation of Joker. And as you can see, we have this top-down shadow view of these two characters represented in this voxel art. I think voxel art is incredibly interesting. I think it's even more interesting knowing that this started in the 1990s. This was created by a man by the name of Kyle Freeman. He created a voxel raster graphic engine, which allowed individuals to, I believe this was used in the mechanical world space, if that makes sense, more for like General Motors and things like that, which actually pops up a lot more in my research than I would have assumed. A lot of these graphic-based programs were used for cars and General Motors and interior design, which I think is really cool that people just took something that was totally corporate and they're like, hey, I'm going to make art with this. I think the funniest part about this is also on my research is I learned that people make voxel art in Minecraft, which is really cool in my opinion. So there's that, I guess. But for voxel art specific, I think it's a cool concept. It's not really for me in terms of if I ever wanted to try it or if, stylistically I'm into it. I think it tends to clash a little bit when you introduce fonts or other things of that nature in different styles other than the pixelated art. So I think it puts it in a little bit of a box, but I respect it. So I'm going to put it in the B tier just because I think it's interesting. The next art style that we're going to be talking about is Y2K. This one is very interesting to me for a multitude of reasons. I think a majority of individuals my age and a majority of individuals on YouTube or watching are going to recognize the Y2K style. It is very specific. It is very recognizable. Y2K refers to the 1990s into the early 2000s technically. I think we more associate it with the 2000s. You can think of it as the ultra techie era in this design style. Just to name off a few of the more recognizable visuals when we think of Y2K: Windows 98, Bratz Tamagotchi. There's a lot more. I think Japanese Y2K is incredibly popular in graphic design right now in 2022. That's a trend that I think is really cool. I like people's takes on it, and I know a lot of really talented artists that really lean into this, and I think it's really cool. This artist specifically is called
Danny Recording.
I honestly love this logo specifically. I think where I'm a little biased with Y2K style is it always is based around a specific character and a funky text. That is just my absolute jam. Simple, bold text and a funky character is just what I'm all about. What's interesting about Y2K style is it actually is a broader footstep of anti-design. So see, we're getting a little callback here. Y2K style is really recognizable. I think it's playful. I think it's fun. I love the colors. I love the approach. And for this one, honestly, I think I'm going to rate it at the A tier. Very straightforward style, very cool, very fun. Thumbs up for me. The final style that we're going to be talking about for the video is 3D design. I think I took the most notes in 3D design. I wanted to give this the proper research that it deserved because 3D modeling and design is so in-depth. It takes so much skill. And I might be a little biased about this because I attempted 3D modeling myself and it is hard. It is very, very, very hard. It took me forever to figure out. Thinking in 3D spaces just takes a different type of brain. But this design specifically is done by Le Chute Design. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is for a French wine, which I think is really cool. Honestly, I think I like this futuristic, techno, otherworldly vibe that is being portrayed in this style. For the background of 3D design, these 3D modeling programs became commercially available with the introduction of CAD systems in 1960. I think it's funny because I started my first job working in CAD programs. I was like 14 or 15 and I was using a CNC machine. They're not fun. They're very hard to learn. So again, referencing back to being used for big commercial, GM, interior design, car stuff. But the biggest breakthrough came from, can you guess it? Ivan Sutherland. He comes back from the Yukio design. The creator of vector designing is also the creator of Robot Draftsman in 1963, which I think is cool because this guy really was pumping out some programs that ended up being very useful for artists in day-to-day life. The same year as that coming out, General Motors, remember us talking about General Motors, and IBM had a partnership and they created DAC1, which stands for Design Augmented by Computer, which was publicly presented in 1964. That's when we first started seeing 3D modeling. We can see 3D modeling in a lot of different things like CGI, video games, or in this case, in art. I think the biggest step from what I understand and from my research in AI art was Blender. If you're not familiar with Blender, it is an open source, so free 3D modeling program. And there are a bunch of very, very talented artists that create in Blender constantly. And it is so impressive. Blender was released in October 13th of 2002, and this really opened up the space for designing for free and using it in art and applying it to graphic design. There's a lot of history behind 3D modeling. It's not technically the oldest one we've talked about today, but I think it's very cool. It has a rich history. And for this one, I'm going to give it some credit. I'm going to rate it at an A. Now, here's the thing. I personally struggle with 3D design. It might not be my first choice of art medium, but I appreciate it for what it is. And I appreciate all the individuals that are so talented with this art medium. And believe it or not, that's it. Those are all of the art styles that we are going to be talking about today. I hope you enjoyed this video. This might be a little bit of a short one because like I said, I am away from home, but it was really fun. And I hope you learned something. If you liked the video, please like the video. If you like my channel, please subscribe. I would love to do more videos like this just for fun. And leave a comment, talk about your favorite art style, talk about how these may resonate with you. If you learned anything new, let me know. But yeah, that's it. See ya.